Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Blue and Broad YouTube channel with another episode of The Rest. I'm your very deflated host, Aris Namatakos, and I'm joined by a seemingly and similarly, I should say, deflated co-host, Nathan. Um, we thought last week was bad, but it quite clearly got worse over the weekend. How are you feeling, mate?
Day by day it gets worse and worse. But look, there's nothing to look forward to anymore. I think that's what hurts a bit more. That's it. Last week we had a bit more hope, but now it's completely gone. But we move forward, and still a final series ahead to watch and enjoy. At least try and enjoy. But that's where we lie at the moment,
Mm.
unfortunately.
At least we're used to not seeing our team in finals, so we can kind of just we can enjoy the final series like we have done in the previous years. But this year will hurt more, considering where we were, where we could have been, and where we potentially should have been. But it is what it is. We're not here to talk about that, because we'll drive ourselves insane, to put it bluntly. And also, that's not what this show's about. Let's go with There's a lot of things that happened, a lot of managerial or coaching changes, a lot of off-field, non-footy related drama, which we'll touch on. But I think let's go to Friday night, and it was a big game, probably like the biggest game in terms of the two best teams going out in terms of for the top four, in terms of like, how do I explain this? The game in which the best teams were versing each other. I think if the highest quality game, if I can finally get my words out. Obviously Brisbane versus Melbourne. It was a blowout in the end, but that's not what we're here to cover. We're here to cover the incident that happened on the 3/4 time siren, or in the second or in the third quarter, regarding Harrison Petty and Dayne Zorko. Now, we don't know exactly what was said. There's been multiple reports about different things. I kind of was half watching the game. I wasn't, of course, I wasn't really paying attention because Melbourne were 10 goals up or whatever it was. So I was kind of half looking at the screen, and I saw Petty in tears, and then at full time, Stephen May giving it to Dane Zorko. What were your initial thoughts before we have come to find what could have been said, or what might have been said? What were your initial thoughts about it?
Well, I was similar to you. I flicked off at halftime purely because it wasn't an interesting game. Melbourne had won the game at halftime, so I turned it off. But I was still scrolling through Twitter, just during that game, and came up on, I think, 7 AFL. So I was a bit interested, but they don't really give you much context with anything. They just sort of throw out a picture there and put some weird caption, and just to spark a bit of engagement. But that was a bit confusing because you don't see it very often, and it's hard to really think about what would have been said in order for that to happen. And I don't. You'd think it would have to be pretty harsh considering the way he reacted. He probably would react more like that if he wasn't that tolerant to that type of abuse or whatever he copped. But I guess it was a bit confronting. I guess you don't see that very often in an AFL game, or just players breaking down like that in the middle of a game at least. And who knows, this could actually, I mean, it could be a thing that happens behind closed doors post match. But I guess it got to him during that game, and whatever Sorko said really would have hit him in quite terrible ways to affect him during that game.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of things are said, and maybe it's not like a stereotype, but it's the whole just put on a brave face, don't like show any emotion while you're out there, like the whole mental side of the game, or whatever you want to call it. But this quite clearly got to Petty, and there's obviously been reports about what was said. We don't know 100%, so we won't accuse or say things without concrete evidence. But apparently, what is almost for sure, it's that is family related, towards Harrison Petty in some way. Now, that obviously in any circumstance, that's obviously not a good thing to hear, especially when it's told by someone trying to get a reaction, or trying to antagonize, or trying to hurt you. Obviously not a good thing to have happen to you. And it's kind of a bit of a what next moment, because I think the AFL aren't investigating it. the AFLPA aren't investigating it. Both clubs are kind of just sweeping it under the rug in a sense. Now we all know what we all hope Petty's doing okay in this in the aftermath of what's happened to him. But when you look at Dayne Zorko, the Lions have said they aren't going to strip him of the captaincy. Personally, if it was my captain, if it was Patrick Cripps, or if it was, say, I was Hugh McCluggage or whoever, I personally wouldn't want him to be representing our club just based on what he said has quite clearly hurt another player in the thing that transcends footy. It goes beyond trying to get a mental edge over someone. By the looks of things anyway, he's just being a nasty person from what it looks like. Would you be comfortable with him being your captain in a sense after this?
Well, not at all, but I think it tells you exactly where that club is at the moment, that they are basically on the edge of just completely collapsing. And I think something like getting rid of him as your captain at that time would completely destroy that club just culturally, because it just shows that they have no clue how to manage everything. And I mean, it's just going into finals, you're being led out by someone and who sets an example that it is okay to sledge players based on personal out of football life, that is okay, that we should, stand up and really fight aggressively, which it's not good in any level of the game. It's pretty disappointing they're letting him go on with it. I'm sure he's a good leader, and there's nothing that, taking away what he said. I'm sure he's a great leader, but that's not part of leadership, doing those things. And I don't know, I'd be surprised if there's not a single other individual at Brisbane that could do exactly what Zorko does.
Yeah, I mean, with all due respect, I didn't actually know he was their captain. I just assumed it was Lachie Neale or Harris Andrews or someone like that. But yeah, I feel like for Brisbane to maybe not take action in an extent that potentially most other people expect that they should have done in terms of like a harsh action. I'm not really sure anything's come of it when it comes to Dayne Zorko. So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting situation, and should they meet again in finals, I'm not sure the permutations about that matchup. But should they meet again, it would make for a mouth-watering first opening or first couple of minutes to see the reactions Zorko get, or the consequences that Zorko faces, because there's a few Melbourne players who will have some choice words and some choice feelings about that, because by all accounts, Petty's a loved individual at the D, so you wouldn't want to say that to any one of your teammates. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, isn't it?
Well, will be. I think they can meet. If Melbourne lose and Brisbane win, they will meet in a semi-final, which is a very possible scenario at this point in time. But yeah, I mean, I just want to touch back on what you said a bit earlier about how the AFL is not investigating, PAs are not investigating. Is that a problem in general in the league? Do they seriously, is that a problem, that the integrity is just not good enough, that this type of incident is just okay, and that as long as it's dealt with behind closed doors, it doesn't matter? I mean, is this setting terrible precedent for the future?
I wouldn't say it's setting terrible precedent. I would say it's not setting a good example. I would say that if you have this happen, I mean, we all know the influence that AFL players and the AFL landscape has on junior footy. If we see the likes of let's just say in this case Zorko saying something, doing this to Petty, without public repercussions, I'm sure he would have behind closed doors had a stern talking to. I would at least hope that's occurred. I wouldn't hope that he's just been let off. But for there to be no public repercussions about this just sets a bad example for everyone playing in junior footy, because it basically shows everyone that, yeah, this is all right. You're just going to get a slap on the wrist. You're going to get a stern talking to, and that's fine. The fact that there's been no proper repercussions is quite concerning in my opinion.
Well, it's just how do you police this sort of thing? Because I look at it and I think, well, if you fine them, what is a fine to these players? I mean, the
Yeah.
amount they earn, what's a fine to them? I mean, it hurts them, but it doesn't really, really hurt them. And is something like that worth weeks off of football, which is where you just think it's probably too much, or I don't know. Where's the line with it?
Well, probably the most recent example you could use, and I'm very aware in saying this that the circumstances were very different. Was Tex Walker last year? Of course, the circumstances around both are extremely different and extremely nuanced in their own ways. But I feel like you could take something out of that in terms of Tex got 6 weeks, 6 weeks, I believe it was, for his
Yep.
racially motivated outburst, if it was called that, or his slur. So, does it warrant a 6 week suspension? Probably not. But does it warrant repercussions on a public scale? Definitely. So maybe a heavy fine. I'm not really sure how heavy a heavy fine is to these players, but at least a public like a public talking, like making it known publicly that this is not acceptable, this is not okay, and really bringing to light why this is not good, because this can't. Yeah, it's a horrible example, and I would dread to see it happen again in finals, let alone in junior footy.
Yeah, well, it's just interesting how they've handled it all. I mean, it happens everywhere, which is interesting. I remember stuff happening like that when I was playing junior footy, and I feel like it got dealt with much better than it does at AFL level. So I don't know, it's just interesting. I just don't, like you said, I don't think it's setting good example for anything future that's going to happen, and I'm sure it will happen in the future.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's move on to news that broke, funny enough, hours before Collingwood on Sunday. I think it was that. It was that Ben Rutten has been officially let go by the Essendon Football Club. We spoke a little bit about this last week, but now he's officially gone, and now Clarkson's off the table, which we'll touch on after this. Where does this leave us? Because with all due respect, and we know exactly what it's like to be in almost this exact same position. They seem to be in a little bit of a crisis at the moment.
It's interesting. I feel like anything Carlton does, Essendon does even worse, and they seem to just lift the benchmark of how
How much
much
you can stuff
trouble you
up.
can really get into. Yeah, and it's just interesting. Look, it's hard to say because I've sort of, like as time goes on, you forget what happened with us. You remember, but you don't remember how you were feeling at the time. But I feel like they really put Rudden in the spot where they just threw him under the bus completely. And maybe he knew behind closed doors that it was always going to end as the season came along and if nothing improved. But I don't know, it just felt really harsh. I just, even after the game, I think if you saw the post match in the room, he was in tears. You could tell he was, physically, emotionally exhausted. It looked like after that Richmond game. I don't know. I'd love to know what direction they're heading in, what plans they have, because I mean I don't think we can think of any right on the spot coaches that are directly available right now to coach the Essendon Football Club compared to what we had last year when Carlton were looking for a coach and there was quite a few more options. And yeah, the Clarkson thing I think just adds insult to injury. Really, just doesn't
Yeah,
help them very much.
yeah. I mean, the way they handled it as well, hasn't been great. I think Clarkson came out and said that it was kind of like a last ditch style attempt that happened on the Essendon front, that he was already too deep in conversations with North to ever turn his back on them. So that was really never an option, despite how much the media would have portrayed that it was quite a convincing argument for the Bombers to get Clarkson over. Where does this could this like maybe not break the Essendon Football Club, but they do need a hard reset in pretty much everything. They've changed presidents, and their new president, with all due respect, hasn't made the best first impressions. I think his few media interviews have not been overly great. If you were able to catch those and the reaction to those, it's not been well received. Is this almost the should they have got rid of him? I think that goes back to this base question. Should they have got rid of him? Were they justified in getting rid of Ben Run?
It's hard to say because I mean I go back to 2021 and I think he sort of had a group that was at least starting something, and
Building, yeah.
they were building. They made the top eight, probably just on a season where they really could have gone either way. But I think the issue with this season is I think they believed what they were hearing in the media about Essendon will make finals, get this far. I think they started to believe that, and I think that translated in the way they played, that it was just very, that it will come to us, it will happen, everything will eventually fall our way, but it didn't. And I don't think mentally they were prepared at all. I don't think Rudden knew how to mentally build on this group, because he did have something to build on, but I just don't think it was advanced at all. I think they just sort of were happy where they were, and that you can't get worse, if that makes sense. You can only get better. But it didn't happen, and they didn't have a plan B. I don't know. I think one more year, not even one more year, sort of like a Brendan Bolton where you give it half the season. If nothing happens, then you switch. But it is hard to say, because you can say, oh, well, then you've just wasted half a season if it goes wrong. But I think he had him in the right direction. There were areas of that football department that weren't showcasing the best of that football club, and unfortunately just did not happen for them this year.
Yeah, I think when you look at the game style of the Bombers, and you look at some of the players, it's quite. I mean, what was very damning is the 66-point loss in round one and a 66-point loss in round 22 or round 23. Just the lack of selflessness from most of the players, most of the senior players, was quite damning in both games, and I think that's transcended to the board and to the whole football department. It's a very I would hesitate to say the word toxic, but I wouldn't say it's far off it. Atmosphere, what seems to be there, and where do they go from here? Do you see a viable coach to come in? Obviously, Clarkson's off the table. I assume Ross Lyon wouldn't be in the conversation. Do they go to someone like an Adam Muse? Do they go to someone like of that ilk? I mean, do they go to someone like a Ash Hansen from Carlton? Is that the avenue that they go down?
It's a really tough question. I don't know which area they want to get a coach in terms of, do they get a coach that is a very development based coach? They get a coach that's very results focused, so in terms of just really fast tracking improvement and results, or do you get someone that sort of has a combination of both? Because I think they would be very stressed out on that terms, in which they don't know which one to pick, because clearly they've had issues with just figuring out what they want from that football club. It's a hard decision. It's a bit of an odd list where it's sort of older and younger players. There's not a lot in the middle at the moment. It's very hard. It's a very weird moment for the club, considering they actually were going up and they've gone right back down again. And you look at other clubs, Carlton, those Freos, who have sort of just not jumped up, but they've had a very quick reset. You could look at Carlton this year. Freo have done it in about 2 years now. This is probably their second year. I think Essendon will be a bit worried that if they can't do that soon, they're in probably even worse trouble than what they are right now, which is hard to believe, but they keep setting new standards.
Yeah, and I think they've come out and said that they want to coach with senior experience and of this coaches of that ilk. I think that backs him into a corner, because I don't see any coaches of that ilk on the market. Because unless you go for Ross Lyon, is Leon Cameron an option? Probably not. I just don't see that happening. And the question goes back to a certain Mr. James Hurd. Is that? I mean, it would be some moment, and it would really, it would be. I think it'd be a shock to me. I doubt it would happen, but if it did, it would be the most. It would be very shocking. Put it that way. Do you see it? Is that a realm in your world that it could happen?
Oh, I do think it is. I just think it's something that it's one of those things where I wouldn't say meant to be, but I just feel like they're in that sort of mindset where anything goes in a sense and they will be happy with what they get. I'm not a big fan of the whole reuse, recycle sort of thing in any sport where you get past players or past coaches to come back to the club. I just think it shows you're not really exploring your options and you're not really looking to try anything new. So I don't think it would be a good idea. I think culturally, James Hurd brings a lot, but they did with Rudden.
Yeah, I mean, we all know his indirect involvement, in a sense, to what happened back in 2012 and subsequently for the next half a decade. Um, I do think his legacy, in a sense, has been tarnished just of the virtue that he was coach at that time. He's obviously went back to the Giants, done his apprenticeship in a sense, or redone his apprenticeship, and is it worth they take a punt on him? I don't know. I think they should go for him? I don't think they should. I think it's time that they need to move on fully. Um, but yeah, it was going to be interesting. I don't know where they go from here, but I feel like this time next week, or 2 weeks after, or a month later, we might be sitting here thinking, where are they going to go from here? Because I don't see a quick fix, and I don't put it this way. I don't see the Bombers doing their due diligence to go through a proper process to find a coach. I feel like they're just going to panic, and that's not based on any bias. That's just based on what I've seen from them last year or this year, especially when things have gone wrong. It's panic. Just do this, do this, do this. There's no real composure in that football club. I don't think so. It'll be interesting to see where they go from here. But if you were to put a bet on any coach, is there any coach that comes to mind?
Genuinely not off the top of my head. It's such a different scenario to what we had last year. I just
Yeah.
don't see anyone that. And finally, you don't hear any names really getting mentioned because I don't think a lot of coaches are wanting to go to them at the moment. And I don't see what the offer is. I couldn't see a pitch that is very positive with that club because what we've seen, I'm not sure what you're going to bargain off that, we've got a great young list. Well, that great young list didn't really perform that well, and it was talked up so much in 2021, and it didn't really perform that well in 2022. You had a couple standouts, but probably regressed in terms of their development. It's just a really tough situation, and it probably, like you said, the whole pressure thing. You've got the other three big the big three other three big Victorian clubs. Jeez, we're both having a bit of trouble today.
Yeah.
The other three big Vic clubs, I mean, they're most are doing well. We won't talk about the one that hasn't, but they're all in the top 10. So they're the only one that's struggling. I guess that does put a lot of, external pressure on the club to perform because you don't want to be that one that's always down the bottom. That's what Carlton were like for a while, and it does suck seeing the other three big ones have success. So tough scenario for them. It will be really interesting to see how this next couple of months pan out.
Yeah, I fully agree. I don't see there's a coach that springs to mind straight away. Whereas across the city to North Melbourne, there was a coach that sprung to mind immediately when when they started their whole coaching process. It was Alistair Clarkson, and it was confirmed midweek. Sonia Hood very gloatingly kind of presented the club's new toy, in a sense. Clarkson is at North. Does it fix them? That is it more than just a coach? Does he have the playing list available to him to do well? What were your thoughts? I feel like to speak about something this big, what were your overall thoughts first? Because mine were, this is a good start, but there's a lot more work need to be doing.
It was. I mean, I think it's a odd decision. I just, like we said last week, I thought Essendon is a much better place for him to land in terms of the list he has, because as much as it's like a separation between old and young, the young actually, like they showed in 2021 that they have potential, whereas this North team don't have that many really. Like they have a couple we could name, but you can't just make the players that haven't done very well. You can't just make them superstars. You might get one or two that break through with a new coach, but it's a good appointment. I think for the club in general, in terms of just getting fan engagement, getting people to come to your games. You've got a premiership coach now. It helps. I'm just interested to see if this is a short-term investment or a really long-term investment, because I don't know how much longer North fans want to wait with this list, if that makes sense.
Do you think Clarko's in for the long term? Do you think
I do think
he's a coach that will take them from and will go through the long, arduous process of building them back up to where they need to be?
I think if he doesn't lead them to that, it definitely has to be to a position where they're able to contend for it. That he at least leaves them in a spot where they can't necessarily go backwards. They can only just stay in a good spot. And I just don't know how long it will take, because some teams take quite a long time to just get back up to the top. Some don't. It's just the way football works. It's a bit of a gamble, It could go right, could go wrong. But I do think that list probably needs 3-4 more years to really contend properly.
Yeah, because we saw this year the glimpses, like we saw against Richmond, what some of their players are able to do. We saw like at times this season what some of their really exciting players like Larky, Zerha, Taron Thomas. David Gignac has had a fantastic season. So the talent's there, in my opinion, and they do have some older players in a sense that could kind of act as that like shield in a sense, like protect these younger players. And I feel like if anyone's going to be able to get the best out of this team tactically, it's Clarkson. I feel like I don't think that's in question. It's just about the buy-in from the players and about the buy-in from the club. Is the club willing to almost take one more step backwards in a sense to get Clarkson in the door. Now it's time to flush out all the dead wood from everywhere, from the playing list, coaching staff, administration, everything. Flat out all the dead wood and bring in winners, because that's what North Melbourne need. They haven't won in a long time, right? They need winners in that team and in that club to build that culture. I feel like Clarkson's a good start, but they just need to flush out more dead wood and then build from there. That's why I was like treading with caution about this appointment, because I was like, all right, this is a good start. They just need more though. This isn't they can't just put Clarkson and think that the whole club's going to turn around. This is the first step in what seems to be like a 12-step plan to get back to where they need to be, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think North Melbourne have like a proper losing culture, and only because it's not like they've been bad for the last 10, 12, 15 years. They had quite a good period where they were like they were in a couple of prelim finals 7 or 8 years ago, and then they were competitive a couple of years, and then it fell away. So it's not like they've had like a consistent losing culture. I think it's just the thing that those players haven't experienced a lot of winning yet. I don't think the club itself has a consistent run of losing in their DNA. But no, I do agree with you. They do need winners that just set the mentality right from the start, so they don't have to go through all that losing, and it doesn't start ingraining in their heads that that's what they're going to come out to every week. But I guess it's up to the club to make the right appointments, and I'm sure Clarkson will have quite a say in who he wants, and I'm sure they'll listen and take on anything he brings to the table, really.
Yeah, no doubt. And when you look forward to next year, what do you expect from North Melbourne next year? I think, I mean, I assume anywhere like in the top 12 would be a success. Do you just want them to be competitive, or do you want to see more than that?
I think Clarkson's someone who will set a target. I think 7 to 8 wins would be where you need to go, and I guess it is a bit of a jump from 2 to 8. But I mean, I guess it's hard to say when you don't know how the rest of the competition will perform. But I think something to 6 to 8 wins would show that they're improving, and it's a confidence in as well. Whereas if you sort of 2 to 4 wins, it's like, is that a lot? Not really. Not a lot to gain confidence on. So I think around 6 to 8 wins, because a lot of position could be anywhere depending on the rest of the comp.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting. Yeah, I feel like from all the clubs that are going to get new coaches, we're going to speak on the Giants in just a second. I feel like the North are going to have the biggest upside next season, in my opinion. I just feel like they're going to be the team best placed this time next year to build off from a good 2023 to a good 2024. In my opinion, I feel like that's where they need to look at, just to build the base next season, get some foundations under their feet, and then build from there. And we spoke about we've spoken about two clubs with managerial or coaching upheaval in a sense, and another club, the GWS Giants, have gone and recently appointed Adam Kingsley as their new senior coach, kind of under the radar. I feel like it wasn't really the talk around him, or the talk around the Giants head coach wasn't really that publicised. But Adam Kingsley has got the job. He obviously was a premiership player at Port Adelaide, spent time as a coach at Port Adelaide, St Kilda, and Richmond as well. I mean, we don't, to be blunt, we don't really know a whole lot about him. We don't really know what he'll offer. But do you think that getting a manager, getting a coach even, of this ilk, kind of in the Michael Voss mold, in a sense, in this type of like in the, of this type of elk, in a sense, of this type of mold, like the assistant coach who's come through a winning culture, do you feel like this is the best way for the Giants to move forward?
Yeah, I do. I think GWS need a fresh start. I don't think you can keep using ex-coaches with them. I mean, I haven't done it yet. I guess they used Sheedy at the start, but that was a different circumstance. But I think it's a good appointment. Like you said, we don't really know too much about him as a coach in general, apart from what he's achieved over his career. But I think it's a good fresh start. I think a team like that probably wants experience, but not proper like head coach experience. They want someone who's developing as well. And I guess it's sort of that whole journey thing with that club helps them develop something new. Yeah, but GWS are just in a sort of weird situation where you wouldn't think they would go back as much as they did. And now we're not really sure if they're going to keep going further back or go forward next year. But I guess time will tell on this appointment. It's a bit hard to say right at this current time, but did get swept under the rug quite a little bit. No one really talked about it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think the talent is there undeniably. I feel like you can't really look at that. Even like their experienced heads and their young talent is there. They do need some final pieces to the jigsaw in a sense, but I feel like everything's there for him to have success. And yeah, they're going to kind of go into this season as a little bit of an unknown entity. Like, are they going to be offensive, defensive, outside run, contested play? What are they going to be focusing their game on? So if it's anything like what Richmond have had in the past couple of years, it's going to be a scary proposition because their talent, player for player, one of the best lists in the league, in my opinion. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. But as we move on to maybe a little bit of breaking news as of the time we're recording this, is that, and this has come through literally during our recording, is that Isaac Rankin has officially requested a trade to the Adelaide Crows from the Gold Coast Suns. So that maybe not has come out of nowhere, but has definitely shocked me in a sense, because I feel like, why would you want to leave the Suns, who are building something quite nice and building something pretty good on the shield, due to the Crows, who still feel like they're a couple of years away. But I feel like we're going to get your initial thoughts right now. Do you see this as a little bit of maybe not a shock that this has been announced because there's been murmurs about it, but a shock that he would want to leave the Gold Coast at this time.
Oh, look, it's not the biggest shock. I think there's always those type of players who struggle to move away from home when you've been there quite a while. I don't know. I think in terms of just a trade, I think Gold Coast win this by far. I don't think Rankin's really. He showed his potential, but I don't think he's done enough to really warrant like a first round or anything, like something where I don't know, something where look, we're both in this period of not knowing what to say today. But in summary, I'm just going to throw over to you so I can compile my thoughts.
Yeah.
I just think the Suns win this trade well.
Yeah, I feel like Adelaide are going to be buying potential, whereas the Suns will be demanding kind of compensation in a sense or like ready-made talent in a sense. Like I assume the Suns would want a couple of picks, maybe a couple of players, I don't know, but they would want quite a bit for him. So whereas the Suns are going to be giving that up for just potential, really, because we've seen if Rankin kind of stagnates and doesn't really improve, he's going to be a serviceable small forward. But I feel like there's a lot of room for growth. Whether or not that growth comes to fruition, we don't know. But yeah, I feel like I just don't know why you would want to leave the Suns. They're building something nice, so, unless it's purely homesick reasons, and of course we can't relate and we can't talk about it as in like from personal experience or anything. But yeah, I feel like the Suns are in a much better position than the Crows, aren't they?
Yeah, on paper you'd suggest that, and it's hard. It's always hard to predict with the Suns because it's just a culture thing. You know, they still haven't experienced finals, so it's hard to ever say will they get better because even though it seems like they're getting better, they never actually make that step and take that step. So yes, on paper, Suns are looking like the better side. Adelaide have some potential as well. So even if it's a combination of homesick and just generally wants to play for the club, I think there is potential in Adelaide, and Adelaide seem to love a small forward at the moment, so it would fit them quite well.
Yeah, I've got like 8 of them, so I'm not. Maybe he goes right to the top of the order. I would think, but we'll see how that develops. I think we'll end up speaking about this when the trade eventually happens. But let's move on and let's finish up with our last major talking point, and that's the Brownlow medal. So we're going to do our big finals preview next week because obviously the bye. I feel like that's a good kickstarter to the finals with the finals bye happening this weekend. But with the Brownlow, I just want to get a top 5. Maybe not in order, maybe in order if you want to do it. But who are your 5 players that will be up there come Brownlow medal night?
I mean, Clayton Oliver's one I sort of said at mid-season. I thought he would take home and he's a good chance. Took Miller's played pretty consistently. You'd assume he'll be up there. Cripps had a good end. And I think Cripps is probably one of those who might jump into the top 5, might not. I think he'll be there. Andy Brayshaw. And hard to say with the 5th. You think Petrarca's played well enough, but I don't. Could go anyway. It's always a midfielder's medal anyway. So pick any good midfielder from any 18 clubs, and I'm sure they'll be up there.
Yeah, no doubt. I feel like the top 4 in a sense are pretty much all but confirmed from most people. It's Miller, Brayshaw, Oliver, and Cripps. I feel like they're the 4 players that you'd think would be there, and then you have the likes of Petrarca, Lockie Neal as well, who's played a fantastic season. So if you were to make a quick prediction about who's going to take it home, you said Oliver mid-season. Would you stick with that choice, or do you want to flip?
Yeah, I'd still stick with Clayton Oliver. He just plays his role every week. I think he usually does enough to get himself on the vote sheet. Whether it's the 1, 2, or 3. So I'm going to stick with Clayton Oliver for the Brownlow. Yourself?
I'm gonna go. Yeah, I'm gonna go a bit different. I'm gonna go with Andy Brayshaw. I just feel like it's gonna be. I don't think he will win it. I would just love to see it because I feel like it's one of those players who no one really thought about who thought could win the Brownlow preseason, and it just kind of exploded onto the scene with Freo as well playing fantastic football. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Andy Brayshaw, but would love to see it. Although I would love to see Cripps win it as well. Although his form slump mid-season might inhibit that. But as we move on to the rest moment of the rounds, now there was really no debating this. It was of course Michael Hurley coming back to football in his final game, kicking a goal, which was great to see. We spoke about there's been a lot of feel good stories. Of course, it started with Sam Doherty, Ben Cunnington, and of course now Michael Hurley. Just yeah, it was a good. I know the game was done. I know his goal didn't really mean a whole lot, but I was just I was just happy he put it through and didn't. It would have been very anticlimactic if he had missed, but yeah, happy he put it through, and it was a good feel good story to end the home and away season. I think
Yeah, it's a good ending. Richmond blokes got around him as well
that was
after the
good.
goal. So yeah, good way to end your career. I guess not on the loss, but to come back, kick a goal, MCG, big crowd. It's just one of those good endings to a football story.
Yeah, it was fantastic to see. But I think that's it for another episode. As you could probably tell, we're still flat, and we'll probably be flat next week and even the week after. But it is what it is. That's football. Thank you all very much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe to the Blue Broad YouTube channel. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Nathan, thank you very much for joining me once again. See you guys next time, and goodbye.